In the middle of a Colorado whiteout, a police helicopter was shot out of the sky and swallowed by the mountains. The pilot survived the crash, but her partner, a wounded German shepherd, lay bleeding beside her, jaws locked around a metal collar as if guarding his last breath. Whoever gave the order believed the storm would erase everything. No witnesses, no rescue, no truth. But miles away, in a forgotten cabin buried under snow, a former Navy SEAL heard something the wind was not supposed to carry, a cry thin enough to miss, strong enough to matter. What followed was a brutal night of survival, a shattered cabin under siege, armed men closing in through the pines, a corrupt commander hiding behind a badge, and one loyal K-9 who refused to let go of a secret that could bring down an entire network. Bullets tore through wood. Engines circled in the dark. A collar became a vault, and when the dawn finally came, it carried Blackhawks, handcuffs, and a truth that could no longer be buried. Stay with this story to the very end, because courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it limps, bleeds, and still stands guard. If this story moves you, please follow the channel for more true-to-heart stories of loyalty and redemption. Comment where you're watching from, or simply write Amen for everyone listening. The blizzard did not arrive the way storms usually did, with warning and drama. It closed in like a door, silent at first, then absolute. Snow erased the road signs outside Silverthorne, Colorado, swallowed the tree line, and turned the mountains into a single moving wall of white. Visibility dropped to nothing. Sound vanished, replaced by the low animal moan of wind grinding against rock. Deputy Air Unit pilot Lauren Hayes was already airborne when the world disappeared. Lauren was 33, lean and athletic, with the compact strength of someone who trusted precision over brute force. Her chestnut brown hair was pulled into a tight knot at the base of her neck, practical and severe. Years of flying had etched calm into her posture. She moved with economical confidence, every motion deliberate. Her skin, pale under the cockpit lights, showed faint freckles along her cheekbones, and a thin scar just above her right eyebrow hinted at a past accident she never spoke about. Lauren had grown up around law enforcement, her father a county sheriff, and the discipline had settled into her bones early. She didn't panic. She calculated. In the rear compartment of the helicopter, secured but alert, lay Diesel, a seasoned German Shepherd K-9 assigned to the aviation unit. Diesel was nearly 7 years old, broad-chested and heavy-boned, with a sable coat streaked black along his back and shoulders. His muzzle had begun to gray, giving him the look of a veteran who had seen too much and survived it anyway. His eyes were dark and steady, intelligent in a way that suggested judgment, not obedience. Diesel was trained for tracking and tactical insertion, but more than that, he was Lauren's partner. He watched her constantly, as if reading her breath. The call had come in fast and thin over the radio. Possible armed movement near a service road that cut through the national forest. Weather warnings followed seconds later, too late to matter. Lauren had weighed the risk, adjusted her route, and gone anyway. That was who she was. Someone who believed that doing nothing was a greater danger than the storm. The helicopter lurched without warning. It wasn't turbulence. Lauren knew the difference. This was impact, sharp and mechanical. The first shot tore through the tail assembly with a sound like metal screaming. The cockpit alarms erupted, red lights blooming across the panel. Lauren's hands tightened on the controls as instinct took over. She tried to climb, tried to bank away from the ridge, but the second burst came from below, unmistakable muzzle flashes blinking through the whiteout, like malignant stars. Someone was shooting at them. The helicopter shuddered, spun, and the mountains rushed up to meet them. Lauren felt weightlessness for half a heartbeat, then the violent slam of steel and glass. The world folded inward. Her helmet struck the side frame, and pain exploded behind her eyes. The last thing she registered was Diesel's bark, deep, defiant, before darkness closed in. When consciousness returned, it did so in fragments. Fire hissed somewhere nearby, weak and angry. Snow poured into the torn fuselage. Lauren hung forward in her harness, blood running warm down her temple before freezing against her skin. Her vision swam. She tried to speak and tasted copper. Below her, partially buried in insulation and wreckage, Diesel lay on his side. His breathing was ragged, his right flank soaked dark with blood. One hind leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. Yet even in pain, Diesel's jaws were clenched around his metal collar tag, teeth locked as if he were guarding it from the world. His eyes were open, tracking movement, alive with purpose. The storm howled louder, erasing the smell of fuel, burying the crash beneath fresh drifts. Whoever had given the order to fire would be watching from a distance, confident. No rescue teams flew in this weather. No hikers wandered these ridges in winter. The mountains would do the rest. Miles away, deep inside the forest, a solitary cabin crouched beneath layers of snow like a creature waiting out the cold. Inside that cabin, Cole Mercer sat at a rough-hewn table, cleaning the bolt of an old hunting rifle. Cole was 39, tall and powerfully built, though the strength he carried was lean, stripped down by years of military discipline. His face was angular, cut with sharp lines, a narrow scar running along his jaw beneath a close-trimmed beard. His hair, dark with threads of silver at the temples, was worn short and unstyled. His eyes were a flat gray, the color of gunmetal, always alert, always measuring. Former Navy SEAL service had left its mark, not in loud bravado, but in the stillness that clung to him. Cole moved like a man who never truly rested, even sitting down. Beside the table, two young German shepherds wrestled silently on the wooden floor. Bear, 5 months old, was already large for his age, thick-boned with sandy brown fur and bold black markings around his muzzle. He was fearless to a fault, crashing into furniture and learning boundaries the hard way. His sister, Sky, slightly smaller and darker, was quicker, more observant. Her ears tracked every sound, her amber eyes sharp with curiosity. Where Bear charged, Sky watched. They were littermates, bound by instinct and by Cole, who had taken them in after their breeder died unexpectedly the previous winter. Cole rarely spoke to people anymore, but he talked to the dogs constantly. The sound of their breathing in the cabin eased something in him that nothing else could. The storm rattled the walls, and Bear froze mid-tumble. His ears lifted. Sky followed, body going still, a low vibration humming in her chest. Cole looked up. Years in combat had taught him that dogs noticed what humans missed. He stood slowly, listening past the wind. At first, there was nothing. Then, faint, broken, almost imagined, a sound threaded through the gale, a cry. Not the mountain's voice. Something human, dragged thin by distance and cold. Cole didn't hesitate. He pulled on his insulated jacket, strapped on snow boots, and clipped a thermal monocular to his belt. Outside, the cold struck like a physical blow, stealing breath, burning lungs. Snow moved sideways, blinding, disorienting, but Cole leaned into it, following the direction the dogs indicated without question. The climb took him along a narrow ridge where the wind scoured rock bare for a heartbeat at a time. Then the storm shifted, just enough. Below him, half buried in white, lay a shape that didn't belong to the mountain. Twisted metal, blackened snow, the broken body of a helicopter. Cole's pulse changed. Not fear, focus. He began his descent, boots cutting into powder, already moving toward the wreckage as the storm closed in again. Behind him, Bear and Sky followed without command, small silhouettes swallowed by white. Somewhere in the wreckage, a woman and a dog were still alive, and the mountain had not finished with them yet. Cole Mercer reached the wreckage just as the wind shifted, peeling snow away in ragged sheets and exposing twisted aluminum and a dying glow of embers. The helicopter lay split like a broken insect, its tail buried deep in a drift, the cockpit torn open to the night. Cole moved without hesitation, boots carving a careful path downslope, breath measured, eyes scanning for secondary threats out of habit he never shed. He found Lauren Hayes slumped forward in her harness, helmet cracked, blood frozen along her temple. Her chest rose, shallow but steady. He cut glass away with a practiced sweep, unbuckled her, and tested her pulse. Alive. He slid an arm under her shoulders and lifted, surprised by how light she felt. Wire and resolve held together by training. Below her, half buried beneath insulation, Diesel lay on his side. The German Shepherd's sable coat was dark with blood along the right flank. One hind leg sat wrong, twisted at the knee. Yet the dog's eyes tracked Cole, lucid and defiant. Diesel's jaws were locked around his metal collar tag, teeth set as if the thing were sacred. Cole knelt, voice low and even. "Easy, old boy." Diesel's gaze never wavered. This wasn't a pet clinging to comfort. This was a partner guarding an objective. Cole recognized that look from dogs overseas, creatures who understood duty without needing words. The climb back to the cabin was a crawl through white oblivion. Cole hoisted Lauren across his back, weight balanced, then gathered Diesel in his arms, cradling the injured leg with care. Snow drove sideways, needling exposed skin. Bear and Sky, 5-month-old German Shepherd littermates, ranged ahead and back, silhouettes darting through the gale. Bear, thick-boned, sandy brown with bold black markings, charged first, fearless and loud in his breathing. Sky, slightly smaller, darker, amber-eyed, kept to Cole's flank, watching the wind and the trees, warning with a single low sound when the trail drifted. Cole followed the dog's instincts as much as his own. One step, one breath, one more life to carry. He'd done this before under other skies, carrying wounded souls out of places the world preferred to forget. Tonight there was no mission board, no chain of command. There was only conscience. The cabin door gave under his boot, and the heat struck like a blessing. Cole laid Lauren on a bearskin rug near the hearth and set Diesel beside her, easing the dog's legs straight. He fed the fire until it roared, then stripped wet layers with quick efficiency. Bear and Sky crowded close to Diesel, bodies pressed tight, forming a living wall of warmth. Sky whined softly and licked Diesel's muzzle. Bear stood sentry, head high, ears pricked. Cole cleaned Lauren's temple, bandaged the gash, checked her pupils. Her breathing steadied. He cut away Diesel's frozen fur, irrigated the wound, wrapped it firm but gentle. The big dog endured in silence, eyes half-lidded, breath ragged but rhythmic. Hours passed. The storm screamed outside, but inside the cabin time slowed to the crackle of fire and the synchronized rise and fall of 4 chests. Cole sat with his back to the wall, rifle within reach, listening past the wind for anything that didn't belong. When Lauren stirred, it was sudden, eyes snapping open, body tensing as if she were still airborne. Cole lifted a hand. Easy. His voice carried the calm authority of a man who had seen panic kill faster than bullets. He handed her a tin mug of hot tea. You're safe. You're in my cabin. You've been out a while. Lauren took a careful sip. The heat pulled her back into herself. She noticed Diesel first, his great head resting across her thigh, bandages clean, chest working hard. Bear and Sky were curled into his side. The younger dogs nested against the older like recruits leaning on a veteran. Lauren swallowed, emotion breaking through the shock. My partner, she whispered, fingers finding Diesel's collar. He's not just a dog. Cole nodded once. I figured. He kept his questions measured, letting her breathe. When she spoke again, her voice carried the clipped precision of a professional recalling a report. They shot us down, from the valley road near the North Ridge. I saw muzzle flashes before we lost power. She met Cole's eyes. It wasn't an accident. Cole listened the way he always had, without interruption, letting the truth find its shape. Who? Captain Grant Holloway, Lauren said, jaw tightening. My commanding officer. Holloway, she explained, ran K-9 and aviation support. 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, hair always perfect for the camera. A man who weaponized charm, whose calm blue-gray eyes made people trust him. He had trained her, signed Diesel's assignment, praised her discipline. A month ago, she continued, I found what he was hiding. Illegal shipments, narcotics, unregistered weapons, moved inside K-9 transport kennels. Nobody checks those units. Disgust edged her words. I gathered proof, transfers, manifests, video. Cole's mind aligned the pieces with machine clarity. And you kept it on you. Lauren's hand tightened on Diesel's collar. Inside the seam of his tag, he never lets it go. Diesel's eyes met Cole's, calm, aware, older than pain. They wanted to make it look like I cracked under stress, Lauren said. When that didn't work, they put me on a flight plan straight into an ambush. Outside, the wind shifted, lowering from a scream to a low hum as snow settled heavy on pine boughs. Bear stirred, head lifting. Sky rose, body taut, ears forward. Cole crossed to the window and killed the lamp. In the dim, his scar caught the firelight like a pale thread. He scanned the clearing with a thermal monocular. 2 faint heat signatures hovered near the tree line, too deliberate to be hikers. They won't move yet, Cole murmured. They're waiting for daylight. He turned back to Lauren. We've got a few hours. We rest. We plan. Lauren leaned back, exhaustion pulling at her, but she didn't fight it this time. Diesel shifted closer, guarding her leg. Bear and Sky formed a living bridge between them, 3 generations bound by instinct. Cole checked locks, traps he'd set long ago for bears and men, then keyed a short burst message on his satellite device. Coordinates only, coded and brief. He'd learned to ask for help without advertising it. Morning came reluctantly, a pale gray bleeding through the trees. The storm had eased, leaving a silence heavier than the night. Lauren watched a flickering news feed on Cole's battered tablet. Captain Holloway appeared, composed and sympathetic, speaking of concern for Officer Lauren Hayes and sensitive data she was not authorized to carry. He urged her to surrender peacefully. Lauren's hands clenched. "He's turning me into the threat." "That's how predators hunt in daylight," Cole said, muting the sound. "They make the world believe their prey is dangerous." From the valley came a low mechanical whine. Engines. Not random. Moving in formation. Diesel rose despite the pain, ears rigid, a low growl rolling from his chest. Bear barked once, sharp. Sky pressed closer to Lauren, trembling but ready. Cole's jaw set. He loaded a fresh magazine, eyes never leaving the window. "They're here," he said quietly. And as the first dark shapes emerged from the tree line, the cabin drew a breath and held it. Morning light crept into the cabin, as if unsure it was welcome. The storm had withdrawn to the higher ridges, leaving behind a deceptive calm that flattened sound and sharpened edges. Frost clung to the window panes in branching veins. Cole Mercer stood at the sink, rinsing a bloodied cloth, his shoulders squared, jaw set. He looked like a man carved from restraint, tall, lean, beard trimmed close to a scarred jawline, moving with the quiet economy of someone who never wasted motion. Combat had taught him that stillness could be a weapon. Lauren Hayes sat wrapped in a wool blanket near the hearth, posture straight despite the ache in her ribs. The shock had burned off. What remained was clarity. Her hair, loosened from its knot, fell in dark strands around a pale, resolute face. She watched Diesel with the kind of focus pilots reserve for instruments that keep them alive. The German shepherd lay near the door, breathing heavy but steady, his bandaged leg propped on a folded jacket. His eyes tracked every sound. Bear and Sky hovered close. Bear's thick, sandy coat fluffed like a shield. Sky's darker fur slicked smooth as she pressed her shoulder to Lauren's knee, a quiet sentry with amber eyes. Lauren spoke without drama. She didn't need to. "It wasn't a one-off," she said, voice steady, clipped. "Holloway built a pipeline." She described Captain Grant Holloway again, but this time with the details that mattered. Tall, broad-shouldered, hair always combed just so, the kind of man whose clean shave and calm eyes made donors comfortable and subordinates loyal. He smiled for cameras and spoke in phrases designed to soothe. He'd risen fast, polished by press conferences and charity galas, his reputation burnished by K9 success stories. What people didn't see, Lauren said, was the pattern. Vehicles reassigned at odd hours, manifests amended after signatures, kennels sealed and waved through checkpoints because no one wanted to question a dog unit on mission. She listed the proof with a pilot's precision. Routes that didn't match deployments, shell transfers laundered through training expenses, warehouse footage of crates moved under K9 banners. "I copied everything," she said. "Bank records, shipping logs, video." Her hand found Diesel's collar again, fingers pressing the seam. "Micro SD, sewn inside the tag. I did it the night before the flight." Cole listened, eyes on the fire, letting the facts assemble themselves. He'd seen this kind of corruption before, authority trading trust for profit, then erasing witnesses with process and paper. "He made you the problem," Cole said. "Textbook." He reached for his tablet, its screen spidered but alive. The local news feed flickered to life. Holloway's face filled the screen. In daylight, he looked exactly as Lauren described. Composed, empathetic, tailored winter coat framing a posture that radiated command. He spoke about concern for Officer Lauren Hayes, about stress and sensitive materials. He urged her to surrender for her own safety. The words were soft. The implication was lethal. Lauren's jaw tightened. He's flipping the narrative. That's the move, Cole said, muting the audio. Turn truth into danger. Turn you into a threat. He checked the perimeter camera, an old trail unit he'd wired years ago. The clearing looked empty, but emptiness meant nothing. Cole had learned to distrust silence. From the ridge came the distant hum of engines. Low, disciplined, not the random growl of tourists or plows. Diesel's ears snapped upright. A low growl rolled from his chest, resonant and controlled. Bear barked once, sharp. Sky didn't bark at all. She leaned forward, muscles tight, gaze locked on the tree line. They're staging, Cole said. Not rushing. That tells me Holloway wants leverage, not chaos. He moved to the table and laid out what little he had. A recorder no bigger than a matchbox, spare batteries, the satellite device, and a folded map with contour lines etched into his memory. He handed Lauren a compact pistol, checked the chamber himself, then set it within her reach. You fight to live, he said, not to win. Lauren nodded. Pain flickered across her face and vanished. She rose carefully, testing her balance. She had the look of someone who had accepted a truth and moved past fear into resolve. What do you need from me? Your voice, Cole said. He clipped the recorder inside his jacket, near his sternum. If Holloway talks, we let him. The hum grew closer, resolving into distinct engines. Through the thermal scope, Cole counted shapes, 3, then 4, moving with measured spacing. Not amateurs, not hikers. He saw a taller heat signature at the center, posture upright, pace unhurried. Holloway liked to arrive as if he owned the ground beneath his boots. A voice carried through the clearing, amplified and smooth. Lauren Hayes, this is Captain Grant Holloway. I want you safe. Come out slowly. The tone was paternal, almost kind. Cole stepped onto the porch, unarmed and visible, snow crunching under his boots. He was careful with his stance, open hands, shoulders relaxed, eyes steady. You've come a long way to talk, he called back. Holloway emerged from the trees, winter tactical gear immaculate, parka zipped to the chin, gloves pristine. His face looked carved for trust. Up close, though, Cole saw the tell. A tiny muscle at the jaw that jumped when things didn't go his way. Mr. Mercer, Holloway said, smile thin but present. You've done your country proud. Don't complicate this. You want what's in the dog's collar, Cole replied evenly. Holloway's smile held, but the flicker was there. You don't understand the implications. I understand leverage, Cole said. He tapped his chest once, a subtle motion. And I understand records. Holloway spread his hands. Hand over the data. The dog gets care. Lauren gets help. We all go home. Behind Cole, Diesel rose despite the pain, placing himself between the cabin and the clearing. Bear mirrored him, puffed and fearless. Sky slid to Lauren's side, body low, eyes bright. Lauren stepped into the doorway, blanket draped over her shoulders like a mantle. You shot us down, she said, loud enough to carry. You ordered it. Holloway sighed, a performance of patience. She's confused, he said to Cole. Stress can do that. Cole met Holloway's eyes. Say it again, he said softly. Say what you just said. The air tightened. Snow whispered across the clearing. For a heartbeat, Holloway weighed his options and chose control. He lifted his radio. Proceed, he said, voice clipped. Quiet. The word hadn't finished echoing when the woods exploded into motion. Boots crunched. Shadows lunged. Cole moved, not fast, but precise, intercepting the first man with a pivot and a knee that folded armor. Lauren ducked back, heart hammering, pistol steady in her hands. Diesel surged forward with a deep bark that cut through the chaos, teeth flashing as he drove at a raised weapon. Bear lunged to flank, fearless and loud. Sky slipped low and fast, snapping at a boot, forcing a stumble. Cole felt the recorder thrum against his chest as Holloway's voice cut through the radio traffic. Calm, surgical, unmistakable. Breach and secure. Avoid the dog if possible. The words landed like a verdict. From somewhere beyond the ridge came a new sound. Distant, heavy, rhythmic, too deep for engines on snow. Cole's head snapped up. He recognized it instantly, even as gunfire cracked and the doorframe splintered. Hold, he muttered, half to himself, because the mountain had just answered back. Snow fell lighter now, and that was the worst of it. With the wind eased, the ground began to speak. Footprints darkened the powder. Branches bent where bodies passed. The forest betrayed movement to anyone who knew how to read it. Cole Mercer read it like a map written in muscle memory. He moved the perimeter in a slow arc, boots silent, breath steady, placing simple alarms that didn't look like traps at all. Fishing line threaded low across game trails, a loose tin cup wedged into bark, a flare pin taped beneath a porch rail. Minimal, quiet, effective. He chose observation points that gave angles without silhouettes and marked 2 exits he could reach blindfolded if the cabin turned into a kill box. Inside, Lauren Hayes tested her balance and ignored the pain. Her ribs protested with every step, a dull fire that flared when she twisted, but she kept moving. She practiced short traverses from stove to doorway to window, learning how to keep her profile narrow, how to let the walls carry her weight. Cole corrected with few words. Restraint is for law, he said once, not unkindly. Survival is for war. Lauren absorbed it, jaw set, eyes clear. She fired controlled pairs at a paper plate tacked to a log outside. Recoil managed, breath timed. When her hands shook, she paused, breathed, resumed. She was a pilot, used to trusting instruments and procedures. Now she learned to trust instincts she'd buried beneath policy. Diesel lay by the door, chest working, ears rigid. His pain came in waves. He rode them without complaint. The bandage at his flank was clean, tight. When footsteps brushed the far tree line, his growl rolled low and even, a warning measured to conserve strength. Bear took his cues from Diesel, big body bristling, fearless heart beating too fast. Sky mirrored Lauren, low, watchful, choosing position over noise. 3 dogs, 3 different kinds of courage, aligned without command. Dusk settled like a held breath. Cole killed the lamps and let the fire burn down to coals, the cabin sinking into shadow. That was when the voice came, amplified and smooth, drifting through the pines as if carried by the wind itself. "Lauren Hayes," Captain Grant Holloway called. "We're here to help you. You're injured. You don't have to make this worse." His tone was careful, paternal, calibrated to sound reasonable to anyone listening from afar. Lauren felt the old anger stir, sharp and dangerous. Cole touched her wrist, a grounding pressure. He stepped onto the porch, hands visible, silhouette framed by the last light. "You want the dog," Cole said, voice carrying, "and what he's wearing." There was a pause, just long enough to hear the lie being chosen. Holloway answered with a sigh, the sound of a man burdened by other people's mistakes. "The data belongs to the state. Hand it over and this ends." Cole tilted his head. "You didn't come for her," he said. "You came for the tag." The line landed. Somewhere beyond the trees, a radio clicked. Diesel's ears twitched. Holloway changed tactics. "Think about your future," he called, voice firming. "You're not trained for this. Let us in." Cole smiled without humor. He tapped the recorder beneath his jacket. "Say it again," he murmured, more to himself than to Holloway. Movement rippled the darkness. The fishing line sang once, faint. A cup chimed. Shapes detached from trees, black against darker black. Cole flowed left, intercepting the first approach with a shove that redirected momentum into a trunk. Lauren fired twice, precise, shattering a porch lamp and forcing the men back without chasing them. Diesel surged, a deep bark cutting through the noise, jaws snapping inches from a raised muzzle. Bear charged the flank with reckless bravery, drawing fire away from Lauren. Sky slipped low and fast, teeth finding fabric at an ankle, then gone. The doorframe exploded inward as a breaching charge cracked the night. Wood splintered. Smoke filled the room. Cole moved like a hinge, close, decisive, dropping the first intruder with an elbow and wrenching the rifle free. A second man stumbled over Bear and fell hard. Sky was on him in a heartbeat, snarling inches from his face. Lauren ducked behind the stove, fired to suppress, then shifted, learning in real time how to let fear sharpen instead of freeze. Through it all, Holloway's voice cut across open channels, calm, surgical, damning. "Secure the animal. Avoid the tag." The recorder thrummed against Cole's chest like a second heart. Diesel lunged despite the pain, teeth clamping onto an arm that had swung toward Lauren. A shot cracked. The bullet tore past, grazing Diesel's flank. The dog held on, eyes bright with purpose, until the man fell screaming into the snow. Then the sound arrived, the one Cole had recognized earlier but hadn't named out loud. It grew from a distant thump into a steady, massive presence that pressed against the chest and made the windows sing. Rotor wash. Heavy. Military. Cole's head snapped up as white light swept the clearing, washing trees and men alike in stark relief. From the dark came ropes and figures in Arctic camouflage, dropping with practiced speed. At their head moved Major Ethan Rowe, early 40s, tall and spare, beard trimmed close against the cold, eyes hard as flint. Rowe's posture carried command without ceremony. His voice did not rise when he spoke. "National Guard," he said, more statement than announcement. "Weapons down." Beside him, Special Agent Claire Benton, from the Federal Anti-Corruption Unit, moved with quiet intensity. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, pale skin marked by long hours under fluorescent lights. Her gaze cataloged everything, from the splintered door to the blood on the snow. Holloway froze. For the first time, the polish cracked. "This is a mistake," he barked. "You don't understand the scope." Rowe didn't blink. "We understand enough." He nodded to his team. Cuffs clicked. Shouts filled the clearing as weapons hit the ground. Inside, Lauren knelt beside Diesel, hands shaking, now that the adrenaline had nowhere to go. She pressed her forehead to his. "You held the line," she whispered. Diesel's breathing was rough, but his eyes were calm, satisfied. Bear paced, whining, then leaned into Diesel's shoulder. Skye pressed close, trembling but fierce. Benton stepped into the cabin, boots crunching over splinters. She took in Cole, the recorder, the dogs. "We'll need the evidence," she said, voice brisk but not unkind. Lauren reached for Diesel's collar. Her fingers worked the seam, careful, reverent. The micro SD slid into her palm, intact, unbroken. She closed her hand around it like a promise. Outside, dawn broke pale and gold over the pines. Holloway was led away, his authority evaporating into the snow. Cole watched the scene, heart still racing, mind already counting consequences. He knew better than to believe the fight was finished. From the ridge came another sound. Engines again, closer this time, not friendly, not retreating. Rowe stiffened. Benton's eyes lifted. Cole felt the mountain draw breath. "Hold positions," Rowe ordered, because the siege had ended, but the hunt had not. Dawn came slowly to the mountains, as if the light itself needed permission to return after the night's violence. Pale gold spilled across the snow, catching on broken branches, boot prints, and the dark stains already freezing into the ground. The rotors of the Blackhawk thundered overhead, flattening the pines and sending powder into spirals that glittered like shattered glass. What had been a siege only minutes before was now a controlled aftermath. Every movement measured, every breath counted. Cole Mercer stood just outside the cabin, rifle lowered but not slung, posture still coiled. In the daylight, his face looked older, the hard lines around his eyes deepened by fatigue and something quieter. Relief he refused to name. His beard was rimed with frost, his jacket torn at the shoulder, but his stance remained unmistakably military. Weight balanced, head up, eyes tracking everything. Years ago, a mission in Kandahar had taught him never to relax just because the shooting stopped. Men who did that didn't live long. Captain Grant Holloway was on his knees in the snow, hands cuffed behind his back. Without the darkness and the performance of command, he looked smaller, thinner somehow, his immaculate gear now smeared with ash and pine needles. His clean-shaven face had lost its careful calm. The blue-gray eyes darted, searching for leverage that no longer existed. When he spoke, his voice cracked. "You're making a mistake," he insisted, trying one last time. "This goes higher than me." Major Ethan Rowe didn't answer. Rowe stood tall beside him, Arctic camouflage dusted white, beard stiff with ice. He was the kind of officer whose authority didn't rely on volume. A childhood spent on military bases and a career shaped by disaster response had burned urgency into his bones. He simply nodded to his soldiers, who hauled Holloway to his feet and marched him toward the waiting aircraft. The man who had sold loyalty for profit was reduced to a problem being transported. Special Agent Claire Benton moved through the clearing with a tablet in one hand. Dark hair pulled tight, pale face unreadable. She paused only long enough to note times, positions, injuries. Benton had built her career in windowless rooms, dismantling networks that believed paperwork made them invisible. She looked at Cole once, a brief, assessing glance. "Your signal was clean," she said. "And the audio, that sealed it." Then she turned to Lauren. "We'll take custody of the evidence." Lauren Hayes stood near the cabin door, wrapped in a borrowed parka, posture straight despite the bruises blooming along her jaw and ribs. The shock had fully burned off now, leaving resolve in its wake. Her brown hair, loose and wind-tangled, caught the morning light. There was a steadiness to her that hadn't been there before. Not the procedural calm of a pilot, but the harder poise of someone who had stared at betrayal and refused to blink. She nodded once, at Benton, then knelt beside Diesel. The German shepherd lay on a stretcher improvised from a door panel, chest rising shallowly, but with determination. His coat was matted and shaved in places, the bandage at his flank already darkening again, yet his eyes were clear. They followed Lauren as she reached for his collar with careful hands. Bear paced nearby, whining softly, thick paws stamping nervously. Skye pressed against Lauren's calf, trembling now that the danger had somewhere to go. Lauren worked the seam of the metal tag slowly, reverently. When the micro SD slid free into her palm, it felt heavier than its size should allow. Proof compressed into plastic and silicon. Truth that had survived bullets, fire, and snow. She closed her fingers around it, breath catching just once. "It's intact," she said, voice rough but unbroken. Cole watched from a few steps back. He had seen men risk everything for symbols, a flag, a patch, a promise. Seeing it embodied in a battered collar around a dog's neck struck deeper than he expected. Diesel lifted his head, meeting Cole's eyes. There was no triumph there, only the quiet satisfaction of a task completed. Cole crouched and rested his hand briefly against the dog's broad chest. "Good work, old boy," he murmured. Diesel exhaled, slow and content. As the sun climbed, the clearing transformed. Medics moved in with brisk efficiency, loading Diesel and checking Lauren. The Blackhawk's engines idled, impatient. Snow melted into thin rivulets that ran crimson, then clear. The forest began to breathe again. Weeks later, spring reached the high country like forgiveness whispered after a long silence. The snow retreated up the slopes, exposing dark earth and stubborn shoots of green. The cabin stood quieter now, its walls patched, its door rehung. Inside, the air smelled of pine sap instead of smoke. Lauren stood by the open window, a file folder tucked under one arm. Her uniform was new, dark blue, crisp, marked with the insignia of an interagency task force focused on corruption and organized crime. The reassignment had come with headlines and hearings. Holloway's name had filled screens for days, his network unraveled thread by thread. Lauren had testified once, clearly, then refused further spectacle. Justice, she'd learned, didn't need applause. Outside, Diesel lay in the sun, his coat glossy again, though his left hind leg dragged slightly when he stood. The limp would be permanent, the vet said. It didn't bother him. He carried it like a medal no one pinned. Bear and Skye, no longer pups, wrestled near the tree line, strong and bright-eyed, learning dominance and restraint in equal measure. Under Lauren's command, they would become the first officially registered dual K-9 unit in her division, trained for tracking and protection together. A pair, like lungs. Cole Mercer stood at the edge of the yard, duffel bag at his feet. He looked leaner, healed where he could be, still scarred where it counted. Orders had come quietly, through channels he hadn't checked in years. An advisory role, training younger operators who needed to learn when to walk away and when not to. He hadn't answered yet. Diesel rose and limped over, pressing his muzzle into Cole's palm. The touch was steady, grounding. Bear and Skye trotted up, sitting tall at Cole's boots, as if reporting for duty. Cole smiled, small and genuine. "You've got work now," he told them. "All of you." Lauren joined him, wind tugging at her hair. "They'll miss you," she said. He shrugged. They'll be fine. Then, or after a pause, softer, you will too. From his jacket, he took a faded patch, the trident worn thin by time and travel. He placed it in Lauren's hand. For when the world gets heavy, he said, not a medal, just a reminder. The distant chop of rotors grew, echoing off the valley walls. A transport helicopter settled beyond the trees, snowmelt swirling in its wake. Cole lifted his bag. Diesel barked once, sharp and clear. Bear and Sky echoed him, tails high. Lauren raised a hand, not regulation, but sincere. As Cole walked away, the dogs watched until he vanished into the trees. Then Diesel turned back to Lauren and the younger shepherds, lifting his head, issuing a single, deep bark that carried authority older than words. Bear and Sky stilled instantly, then fell in beside him. The mountains held the sound, and then let it go. Somewhere above, the helicopter became a speck and disappeared. What remained was a woman who had kept her faith, a dog who had kept his oath, and a truth that had finally been heard.